Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. I'm Scott, your host, with Craig, co-host, and our special guest, Stephen Ramirez. Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So should we call you Stephen or Manny, or what should we call you?
We'll avoid the confusion for the church family, and we'll just go with Stephen.
Okay.
Manny is strictly primarily a work thing.
A work-only thing. Yeah. Which, people listen in, you're the recently retired guy.
I am the recently retired guy.
With...
But not retired from working altogether, just from the military, right?
Correct.
You have another job, right?
I do.
Your kids still want food.
I am already working at another company. Yeah. If I had just called it at 41, I'm pretty sure Brittany would kill me.
Well, it depends on how big the old package is from the military on the way out.
It's not that big.
It's not that big. Okay. So welcome to civilian life.
Yep.
Well, we're always excited to have different guests on. We'll jump into some of your story as how you found Jesus and what it means for you to follow him. But you spent 20 plus years, almost 21 years in the Air Force / National Guard.
And by the way, lest we forget to say it, once again, thank you for your service to all the rest of us who benefit from brave men and women just like yourself.
Oh, thank you.
And you guys have been part of Mission Church and then had a stint in Ohio and then back. And so part of the Mission Church family. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I think was super cool, and I think we've brought it up on the podcast before, is just the ceremonial part of ending things. Mm-hmm. And we had that. I was being able to witness that 2 weekends ago. Mm-hmm. And it's super cool. And it's super important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Because I don't feel like we have enough ceremonial things in our culture. Mm-hmm. I think we kind of miss that as Americans. We don't for like kids and for different stages of life. We've got weddings and funerals and graduations from schools and retirement parties. Like that's kind of it as far as the big culture. But I think it's super valuable to do something official to mark an end to something. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's in a sad way where we have
to mark the beginning of something.
Or to mark the beginning.
In the case of a wedding.
Yeah. So, sometimes we don't do a great job. Especially like if you're dealing with grief. Like it's sometimes good just to, it doesn't have to be loss of a loved one. It could be like a job or something. Mm-hmm. And to have like a ceremonial moment, whether it's just a hike and, the old school youth group is like, you have a sin, you write it on a piece of paper, you burn it in the burn barrel, right? And you're like, I'm done with that part of my life, or something like that. So for you, you had the official part weeks ago, mm-hmm. where you quit going to base.
Yep.
You quit going to work, and you're going to a different job.
Which, by the way, it already feels weird going back to base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you at the ceremonial part? That was a really long-winded lead-in to ask you that question.
Nope. It was a lot more impactful than I thought it would be. Brittany kept asking me as we were leading up to it, like, "Hey, are you okay?" Because I just sort of seamlessly transitioned. It was like one day I stopped going to work. I took a couple weeks off, and then I started my new job, and I love my new job, and love the culture there and the people there that I've met so far. So it was really easy for me to transition from the service over to civilian life, and Brittany was just like,
and you're doing similar work or almost the same work.
Yeah. So I did personnel in the military, which is the military way of saying HR, right? And I'm doing HR now at my new company. So that part was pretty seamless. But as we start leading up to it, Brittany just, as she does, right? Like she knows my pulse, and she's just like, "You okay? Like you're kind of just going through this like nothing. Are you feeling anything?" I was like, "No, I'm feeling good. Everything's all right." But the ceremony definitely closed the chapter officially. I think doing it a month after my actual retirement date probably had even more of an impact. And then having my brother do it was just huge. For those that don't know, my brother was the one who officiated my ceremony, which just made it all the more special. Retirement ceremonies are so wonderful in the military anyway. I've done so many of them, been a part of a bunch of them, that every single time I can't help but get emotional, no matter whose ceremony it's been. So, Scott, for you, you were there. I was a wee bit emotional.
Yeah.
And I think for good reason. It was just a great end to what I feel was just a great career.
Yeah. And, you had a party too later that
Did.
evening, and so
Yes.
Dad, you were at that. But in the ceremony, it was just cool. It was in the hangar.
Yes.
So you got this
KC-135.
135 hanging out there, and then you got all of the like maintenance and stuff. And I paid attention to the whole thing, but
Okay.
half the time I'm like looking around. I'm like, can I go look at that? And like, what's that? Is that a speaker up there? Do you
I
guys
hope you
pu-
took some time at some point.
Did
to
you guys
actually go
have
and walk
like
around.
music pumped in there when they're
yeah.
working? I'm like,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a speaker. It's just cool. It's a cool setting. I know for like most of the guys, it's work spot, right?
Yeah.
That are there. But I'm like, this is cool. This is a cool work zone.
Listen, even when we would hold any ceremony there, which it's funny that you mentioned the speakers because one of the last retirement ceremonies that I was a part of, in the middle of the ceremony, the music just started playing, and I mean it just started blaring on the speakers. So you've never seen me run so fast to go
And that
to the
was not a
back.
planned part of the ceremony. It was a
Certainly not.
big faux pas.
Yeah. When I told the guys who were in that room that it was in, they couldn't hear it, and they were just like, "Oh no!" And everybody's moving quick to try to shut it off.
Yeah. But it was super cool and honoring. Your brother was there. And he's in Japan right now, right?
He
Stationed
is.
there.
Yeah, he's in Japan right now. He's almost been there 2 years, or been there almost 2 years, and he'll be coming back in July.
Okay. And is that rare? Because he's in the Navy,
He
right?
is.
He's a Navy SEAL.
Yep.
So is that rare for a different branch military member to lead the retirement thing, or does that happen?
Yeah, I mean it happens,
Okay.
but I think it's definitely more on the rare side because typically in military retirements, it's either somebody that you've worked with in the past or your current commander. That's usually the way that it goes. But from the time that I knew that I was going to be retiring, I've been telling Bobby for years, like, you're going to do it. So I don't care what you've got to do, you're going to do it.
Yeah, and nothing like older brother leading it is great. He did very good honoring, but then like
Well, he was
enough
definitely
older
still
brother
big brother about it,
jabs.
yeah.
Enough like upbringing stuff. But it, to keep it real. But it was super fun and honoring. And other people were part of it and said things, and yeah, it was super great. And in case people don't know you, I mean, obviously more than military, you're a husband, a father. Like if people don't know who you are, like, what's it like being Stephen Ramirez?
Oh, ooh, I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before, Scott. And we've had some talks. It's awesome. It's blessed. I think that's probably the best word that I can come up with.
Because you got three little blessings.
I've
You
got
married
three-
to Brittany, you've mentioned her, but then
Yes, I've got 3 amazing little blessings. All 3 of them seem to be 3 little clones of us, which is still weird. Even 12 years in with Grace, it's still weird to see them have both of us in them. They all love baseball and softball, which Brittany and I both love, so that just kind of falls into place, and hopefully that continues.
Now, does that fall into place, or is that like mandatory in place?
It's not a mandatory in place. I really don't think it's a mandatory in place. Now, can you say, like, was there influence? For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We joke about it in the Langhans. Like, if you don't like water, what do we say?
You're out.
Like, literally, you're out. Like, we just kick you out,
Yeah.
maybe permanently. Like,
Yeah.
you're out of the family. If
Yeah.
you don't like to be on a boat or at a beach,
Yeah.
we don't know who you are.
There won't be a kick out because, I mean, my sister was about as big a softball player as I am a water skier, which is not.
Right.
Yeah. So it's definitely not a mandatory thing, but there's definitive influence for sure.
Gotcha. So you got Grace, Scarlett, and
Everett.
Everett, the little
Yep.
guy. So super fun. That guy's got a ball of energy. I love him.
He never stops, man.
I know, it's so great.
Yeah.
He's always got something happening. So
He
it's,
really does.
It's so good. So wanted to just hit on that memorializing, ceremonializing. And I think that's just valuable for all of us and listening in, and whether it's even just like maybe in school they do an awards banquet for the end of a softball season or track season. And I just think we should do a little bit better at that. I mean, we got birthdays that come around, but I don't know. I just think that's healthy for all of us.
I couldn't agree more. And I've wondered about that, like what has happened in our culture. And I don't know that I know the answer, but I know one thing that I've observed, and that is that when there is a ceremony, there's a tendency in our culture to minimize it. It's like, it's just a ceremony. It's not the substance. The substance was the 21 years you served this nation. The ceremony is like yeah, you can take it or leave it. It's like, or in a relationship, wedding ceremonies.
You got a wedding rehearsal
I
today?
got a rehearsal tonight and a wedding tomorrow, and so what's the point of the ceremony? And we already love each other.
You're performing the ceremony, just in case anybody's confused. You're not getting married tomorrow.
This is true.
Just clarifying that. Hate for that to go out on the internet.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
I'm really glad we clarified that.
Yeah, there was a question. There was a question on that.
Stephen and I weren't thinking along those lines, but apparently you were.
Just in case somebody's new to the podcast and they're like, "This old guy's getting married." Well, good for him.
Yeah. Well, it's about time. Cindy and I have been living together 48 years.
Well, let's make it
Almost
official.
49
Let's
here
make it
next
official.
month.
Let's have a ceremony for it.
Why don't you commit for the rest of your life, Craig? How many days that is?
Yeah, exactly. No, the tendency is to minimize that, and wedding ceremonies are a great example of that. A lot of people just living together. It's like, why do we need a piece of paper? Why do we need a ceremony? We love each other. We're committed to each other, so let's just do this. But it just overlooks so many important things that are part of what the ceremony means and part of why the ceremony is important.
There are a lot of people, there are a lot of military members who going out don't like to make a fuss. And that's how they view something like a retirement ceremony, because there's a lot of work that has to go in behind the scenes to make it happen.
Yeah, you guys put in a ton of work. I mean, I could tell as one who puts on events and ceremony, like there was a ton, and there was a bunch of other personnel involved, and yeah, it's a big thing.
It is. It really is a big thing, and military members more often than not they would rather just sort of walk off into the sunset, right? Ride off in the sunset, and that's that. But this retirement ceremony, as much as it was my retirement ceremony, it wasn't about me. It really wasn't. And that's how we try to frame it for those who are hesitant whenever a ceremony is coming up. This was more about me getting an opportunity to thank my brother in my speech, right? My hero, to thank Brittany and the family for just all that support. And then to thank you guys, because in 2013, you took us in and immediately it just felt like home. I remember Brittany and I think, Craig, I've told you this before.
Yeah.
Our first time stepping in, within 2 minutes, we looked at each other and we were like, this feels like home.
Isn't that weird how that happens? Like,
Not anymore.
No?
Not
Okay.
anymore.
But I hear it frequently, and it does seem weird to me when I hear it from other people. It's like, your story is not unique. I mean, it's special to you, but lots of other people have told me the same thing. It's just like, yep, I knew right away.
Yeah, I just think it's always fun. I mean, it's good. It's a good weird where you meet somebody, you like have that instant connection. Like we could be friends. Mm-hmm. Like Amy and I, we met somebody a couple years ago, and then we've only seen them a couple different times, and I'm always like, we should get together, with them. But then Steve and I were just chatting before we got going, like how busy life is. Doing softball right now. Like we're wrapping up track season, golf season. Business and life and Mother's Day, and we did some logging this last weekend, cut down 8 trees, and anyways, just is like we need some margin. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of at the end of the military career, and your life is like transition. But let's back it up and ask this question: how did you find Jesus? When did that relationship with God start for you? What did that look like?
So I always believed in Jesus growing up, right? I was raised a Catholic. When we moved to Mexico, I was going to Catholic school. I was doing a bunch of stuff that I didn't recognize.
How old were you when you guys moved to Mexico? 7. And where'd you move from?
Phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first 7 years were in Phoenix, and then we were in Mexico for 3 years.
Did your parents grow up in Mexico? Is that the reason that they wanted to take you and the family back there, or
work is actually what took
work.
us to Mexico? Yeah. Though the first part of your question is yes, they both were born in Mexico, and my dad moved to Texas when he was, I think, 10-ish. Don't quote me on that, Dad. Mom moved from Tijuana to San Diego when she was pretty young too. So Dad went from Texas and eventually over to LA. My dad was working
I liked how you said Tijuana.
Yeah, Tijuana.
Because the Spanish accent.
Tijuana.
Of course. Yeah.
No, my dad worked for a software company, and they
I
just
thought you were going to
moved
say
him.
you excited he called it TJ, like Trader Joe's, but different.
I mean, it could have gone.
Well, that too. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Nope. Oh, okay. The company moved him from Phoenix to Mexico, and he was the plant manager when we were down there. And it was just an awesome opportunity that I think my dad looked at. And for us, like, I loved my time in Mexico looking back. I mean, all the history that's there, and then really just sort of that cultural connection kind of getting to my roots, if you will. And
What part of Mexico?
we were in Chihuahua, so just south of Texas, but we were in the city of Chihuahua. So we were about 4 hours south, and my dad was actually born in Chihuahua in a small little pueblo called Coyame. So I got to go there and like went there a couple times while I was younger. It was so cool. And a couple years ago, we took the kids to Mexico City, and Grace was the same age that I was when I went. So it was just really cool being there with my dad and my daughter.
Yeah.
And
My wife and I spent the first 2 months of our married life in Puebla.
in Puebla?
Yeah, working with Youth of the Mission.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mexico
Anyway.
was great.
So you growing up believing in God.
Yes, there we go. I was like, what was the question again?
How do we get on geography? Just family. And then, so just keep going with the story.
So after we moved from Mexico, we went to Albuquerque, and we became, what a lot of families tend to do. I don't want to say a lot. Some families tend to do, which is we went to church on Christmas Eve and Easter. And we lived across the street from a huge Baptist church in Albuquerque. And I had some friends who I went to school with who, even from a young age, were just really, really all about this Jesus thing. And I mean, this is like early 90s when the What Would Jesus Do bracelets first started.
Oh, yeah.
I'm dating myself here.
The original, not the new stuff.
Yep. So my buddy Jared Bridge, he went there and he asked me to start going to youth group with him when we got into middle school. So I started going there.
So what age were you when you moved back?
4th grade. So I was 9.
9.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't in Mexico very long.
No. And started going to youth group. So there was always that connection. And then when we moved to Georgia, I was involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Young Life, and then Young Life was run through one of the Methodist churches down there, and I had a lot of friends who went there, so I would occasionally go. But late 2013, I think, is when I finally discovered my real relationship with Christ. And that was just after we moved here. It was a tough time transitionally, and just for Brittany and I, with things going on in our marriage that were starting to surface, and things going at work that weren't going well, which was forcing me to work more, which was forcing me to be, which was keeping me away from Brittany longer. And it just brought up a bunch of stuff that we needed to work through. And I didn't have the strength to do it myself. So leaned on him, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you kind of skipped over a little bit there, but Atlanta, that's where you became a Braves and
Ooh,
Falcons fan.
wow, gotta
right?
say it like that.
Kind of
right?
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. You said it like it was it
how
was the
dare
B
you,
word,
right?
or the F word. The
Well,
Braves
that's
and the
just-
Falcons.
That's just the sports jab.
Is it
You
okay
kinda
if I
gotta
have a
say with
sticker
that.
on my car?
Yeah, you're like, you live in the Northwest. I don't know why you're a Falcons fan. Do you remember that Super Bowl moment? Like, that's when you abandoned ship. And
I've
kinda-
blacked out that entire game. No idea what happened.
Remember when they thought they won and they quit? Anyway. So,
Let me ask you a question. So in all of that, where would you say what was the turning point where you could say for certain at this point I know for sure I was born again? Jesus said to Nicodemus, "You're not going to see the kingdom of God unless you're born again." So that has to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And it happens at a certain point in time. Some people know exactly when that point in time is. Some people aren't real sure. But they get to a point and they realize, okay, I know I'm born again now. I'm not sure when it happened, but I am now.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say there was a service where freedom was the cards were passed out about freedom, right? And the question that question on the front, like, are you this? Do you suffer?
You're
from?
talking about here.
Oh yeah, here.
Yeah.
I know the cards you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, we were just reworking that graphically for Celebration Night tonight. So
Yep.
literally this week, we're looking at some of those same bulleted items, depression, anger,
Yeah.
isolation, grief, addiction, just kind of seeing what resonates with people.
Yeah. And when I saw the card, it just sort of struck me a little bit, and I leaned to Brittany and I just said, I think I need to do this. And Brittany looked at me, she was like, I think you do.
It's a good one, buddy. Yeah, you go for
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
See if you can go 2 times.
But even before that, Craig, before I answer the question completely, we went to the Freedom Dinner, the kickoff, right, where everybody kind of the mic gets passed around after they talk about what it is, and it's like the question was asked, "Why are you here?" And I took the mic, and it was like, "Oh, well, my wife and I have a great marriage, and we just want to look to make it better." And I gave a very generic answer. I remember I passed
But
the
in
mic
fact, you were
back.
having marriage challenges,
Oh, yeah.
right? Yeah, that's what you just said.
I mean, it was a flat out lie.
Okay.
It was a lie, right? And it was an unintentional lie in the sense of like, I think I had it in my mind that long term we were going to be okay, and by and large we were doing all right. But the look on Brittany's face after was just like disappointment. And I looked at her after. I was like, "Hey, what's wrong?" As we were driving home, she was like, "That was all a lie. We're not in a great place. Our marriage isn't great. We're hurting." So diving into the program, throwing that 12-step book against my wall more than a handful of times. I think I stomped on it a few times, walking out on it, leaving it alone, like all of that stuff just sort of led me down the path. And I think probably about halfway through is when I knew, like, okay, I'm all in. I'm all in on Jesus, and I am born again. And I think it was that October that Brittany and I baptized one another, which, I mean, I'll never forget. And that was the first time I think that you and I had really interacted.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going through that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember like the bulleted point or points that really stuck out to you when like what God was saying to you? Do you remember? Just because I'm curious, we were going through it this week and just trying to figure out.
Fearful? I think, was it fearful? There was one about lying in there and avoiding. I think it was lying and avoiding. And those were the two that stuck out to me. And in going through the process and the program, I just found that there were a lot of reactive things that I grew up with that I just had to really work through, and defense mechanisms were put in place that prompted lying and avoiding. So I had to tackle that head on.
Yeah, which, a lot of us have a tendency to have and or just do a lot in our life to look good, make sure we got it together, put on a front for others, and just even for ourselves. Like, I don't want to roll around each day and go, man, my life's chaos and just horrible.
Right.
But like, okay, I got it together. It's okay. It's not as bad as it really appears. But it's helpful in life to look at the scoreboard and go, nope, that's the real score.
Yeah.
And once we acknowledge that's where we're at, then God can work with us to like help us grow and change and come to Him when we're actually in need of restoration, salvation, and the healing process.
And hence the book throwing. A lot of book
A
throwing.
lot of like that's not where I'm at. I don't want to acknowledge it. All that.
Yeah,
Right?
a lot of book
You're
throwing.
It's not me. This is not me. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's okay. I'm all right. Everything's okay.
I ran across at a conference one time. I ran across this phrase. Somebody was talking about their own life and their own experience, and they used the phrase avoidance behavior. It's probably from psychology or whatever. And they began to talk about how when they got stressed, when they were overwhelmed, when they didn't know what to do, then they would just avoid. They would just compartmentalize, just put whatever it was, the decision, the relationship, the circumstances. They just put it over here and then go somewhere else and try to live life. Yeah.
That was this guy right here.
Yeah, well, I think we can all relate to that. I was relating to that person as they were speaking, and I thought about that, how much of the time our lives are defined by avoidance behavior. I mean, it could be something as simple as just watching TV, going hunting, going outside and doing yard work, going on a vacation, going to the store, going shopping. Not that any of those things are bad by any means, and not that any of those things are automatically avoidance behavior, but we could be engaged in some of those things, and if we're honest with ourselves, like, okay, the reason I'm actually doing this is not because of the thing I'm doing, like I needed to shop and get some stuff. I'm doing this because I'm avoiding stuff I really don't want to deal with.
Yep.
Just so everybody knows, I'm feeling better already because baptism is another ceremonial moment we have in life. So there's one more for the list.
Yes.
I was listening to what you were saying, Craig, but you said baptism. Like, hey,
I
that's
thought
another.
maybe what I
there's
said
another
made
thing,
you feel
yeah.
better somehow. I was trying to see the connection.
I felt bad because you talked about shopping, and I thought about the mall. I'm like, that place makes me have low blood sugar. It's not good. I don't. But no, the baptism moment, right?
Yeah.
I send that to you guys. I was going through like old baptism clips.
You did.
Not too long ago.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's a cool moment. Like, we dig through the server and we find old stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, Kyle will send me something or whatever. You're like, remember this? Like, dude, that was a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I love it.
But the baptism is a great ceremonial moment where we just acknowledge the work that God's done inside of us when we go public. And, everybody does a little bit different on that, but making that a thing is great, inviting family and friends. If all works out for this weekend, I'm helping baptize a friend this weekend, and it's going to be a great moment, celebrating the work that God's done in his life and family and going public. And takes a little bit for some people to get the nerve up to go in front of people, right? They're always like, do I have to go in front of people? Well,
Yes.
that's the public part. Yeah, that public declaration. But it's going to, be a fun celebration moment. So for you, I mean, following Jesus, like most of that's really been through, the lens of the military career.
Yeah.
Which is a little different. I'm not a military guy. You're not a military guy.
Nope.
I didn't grow up in, that household. We have family.
Yep.
Both
Two of your
brothers.
uncles.
Did both your brothers serve?
3 of your uncles. Yeah, my oldest brother did. My next oldest
Chad.
brother, Chad did. Chris did not.
Chris didn't. Right. Okay. Yeah. And then mom's 2 brothers did.
At the
Mom's
time,
dad.
the Vietnam War was on,
Yeah.
and I was actually my draft number was I was coming up. I was going to be pretty soon, and I had a student deferment for a little while. Then when my student deferment expired, the war was winding down, and
Yeah.
they stopped calling people up.
But it's a little bit different as far as just following Jesus, but you're also a man under authority. So when they say move from this town to that town,
Yep.
which is very disruptive for relationships and friends and like church family, and it's like, well, and moving along. So talk to us about just like following Jesus through being a Air Force Master Sergeant.
Well, it wasn't the moving and the disruption wasn't really a big thing for us until here, only because Brittany and I were used to it, and because when we lived in Las Vegas before we moved here, we went to church, but we didn't really have relationships. Certainly not with anybody in church, really. And then there was like a mom group who we had some friends that were also Air Force members that we kind of had a circle of friends with. But leaving them was just, par for the course because they were getting ready to leave also. But moving here and really deciding to plant our roots and, us knowing that this is where we wanted to be and me trying everything I could, like in 2016 and 2017 before I got my orders to stay here, we knew this is where we wanted to be. So when the orders came, man, that it hurt, right? And it stung. Just because we thought we have such a great church family here. There were so many good things going. Britt works at the preschool here, so we've got that going. The girl's growing up in a school with a bunch of great friends. Now we get to go try to do it again, right? And Ohio on top of that, which no offense to Ohioans, Ohio's great.
I don't know if anybody from Ohio's listening, but
Right. But it wasn't home. So that part was really hard. But at the same time, we knew what we wanted long term, so we were just able to sort of frame it in the sense of like, we know Ohio's temporary, we know we're not going to be there for forever, and then we know that we've got our goals that we want to do, but we know where we want to end up, which was back here. So in the meantime, we'll go to Ohio. We're going to soak it all up for everything that we can, which by the way ended up being the best job that I had in my military career, working at Ohio State. I know it was really tough. Really, really tough.
really tough.
Really tough.
Yeah, living the Buckeye life.
Yeah. That
It
was hard.
seemed fun from afar.
It was a blast. I mean, I can't lie. It was so much fun. Being able to go to home games, watching from the field, getting on TV, just things like that are just like, sure.
Oh, so you're all about fame and fortune. I got you. That's cool.
The veil's been removed.
There you go.
It's on.
Now we know the real Stephen.
now you guys know. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you guys moved back, and I remember we had the when you were able to come back moment. We had
Oh,
the
man.
little parade.
Oh yeah,
parade
we were
of
all
cars.
in that.
Oh god.
And that was in the start of COVID.
I was thinking about that this morning, and we wanted to come back so bad. I was looking for jobs to transition into the Guard all the time. And thankfully, I had some Guard friends who were also keeping an eye out for me, and they would send me ones occasionally. And finally, I found two that lined up perfectly with my career field and where I was as far as my rank and everything. So I interviewed for both of them, and thankfully, I ended up getting one of them. So those that don't know, I got the job I think I got offered the job in October. Everett was born. And then 2 weeks later, I deploy to Afghanistan. So that was hard. So that's October of 19. And I even made mention of that, like leaving your 2-week-old. That was the hardest moment of my life.
Dude. Yeah. Yeah. Like during your ceremony, like you said, you got emotional, and I don't get too emotional. There's points I'm like, keep it together, man. Keep it together. There's like people in uniform watching. You
Yeah.
look tough or something. Gosh.
No, that was really hard.
Had you done other deployments?
One other.
Okay.
And we were here for it. I deployed to Qatar in 2014. So that was summer of 2014 to Jan of 15. And the church just wrapped their arms around Brittany and the kids, which was phenomenal for me leaving and knowing that they were taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you had to leave Everett, little guy, for 6 months. And then, as mentioned, when you came back, your family was with Brittany was with her family.
Yep.
Because you got brand new baby and
Yeah,
kids, and you
we
got
just-
you need some help.
Right. We didn't think that being in Ohio was going to be great for her and the kids because and this is not to discount the great friends that we made in Ohio and how good and how wonderful they were taking care of us. And sure, I know that they would have done the same. But Brittany thought it best. We thought it best to come out here to the west side and be with her family. And there were still, obviously still challenges, and then COVID on top of all that. And then me coming back and us not being sure of when I was going to come back. There were stop movements, and all of that was a whole God thing too, because I was supposed to leave in April, and then everything got halted, and nobody was leaving. And then I was basically taken off of the return list and just sort of put on standby. And then one day at random, my name popped up on a manifest to leave essentially at the same time that I was originally planned to, which everybody looking around was going like, "What did you do?" I didn't do anything. And all
I know
the planners don't
I
know
know
what happened.
Jesus.
It just happened, and I was just like, I think the big guy's looking out for me right there on that one. So, got to come home basically on time, but had to go to Ohio and isolate for 2 weeks, which what's all that about?
Well, I don't know if you remember, the world was kind of crazy in March and April of 2020.
But what made me think
And
about
for quite a few months afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I think it's still crazy in some respects.
Is it?
Just a little
Hopefully,
bit.
A little bit.
a little bit.
Man.
But what made me think about this morning was not even what made me, but what I was thinking about this morning was it was April, right? So we're kind of right in the thick of lockdowns and the distancing. And I remember when they called me out front, and then all of a sudden this just parade of cars that start coming by. Man, it was joyous, and
That was very cool.
it was so
for
cool.
us who were in the parade.
It was a little sad though too, because it was like you're right here, but it's like, hi, haven't seen you in 3 years.
Oh, so many.
Hi.
We just all got, but a lot of people, we just got out of cars.
But I was gonna say, I feel like we hit a point where it was just like, yeah, no, this isn't gonna work. And I came over to you guys. I
Yep.
didn't care. I went through the car. And
We didn't care either.
Everybody ended up getting out, and it just ended up being this beautiful
Yeah.
reunion, which I think just sort of encapsulates how the Ramirez family feels here at Mission.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
loved.
that's how we feel about you guys, so it all works out.
So-
Just so you know, in case you keep track at home, I'm feeling even better. That was another like ceremonial moment.
You know, the purpose of this podcast is so that Scott will feel better, and
Scott
we're
can come to the
succeeding
realization that
wildly
there
in
are
this
more
particular
ceremonies in
episode.
life.
And this is what maybe Scott's realizing, that maybe he's not paying attention enough, and maybe not leaning into these moments appropriately.
Hey, I'm here for you, man.
All right, I appreciate you coming on the podcast so I can feel better. It's free therapy and counseling.
So your question to Stephen was, what was it like following Jesus when you got orders to go places that you didn't necessarily want to go? Ohio, Afghanistan, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know, the rest of us that are non-military don't have to deal with that. And then I got to thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking, but in some ways we do. And I look back on my life and realize 2 specific times.
Yeah, you went to Wilbur, Washington, remember?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking about. So 2
yeah.
specific times I got orders from, you know, the sergeant in the sky.
The
from,
higher up.
from Yep.
Wait,
from
is
the commander
sergeant,
in general.
Can we just take that little detour? Is the sergeant the right one?
Commander.
Like we were trying. No, I didn't feel like
the,
that was
the
right.
5-star
Like the
general.
captain?
I don't know. Help me out
Like
here.
the ranking. Kyle went down a rabbit trail. He told me yesterday. He's like, dude, as soon as you brought that up, was like Googling it, and I'm trying to figure it out because we're ignorant.
All right,
we don't know.
How about the supreme commander?
That doesn't.
Well,
That sounds like Star Wars or
It does.
something.
I would just say
I got marching orders from Jesus.
The big boss. Yeah.
How about
Say
that?
just
'Cause he has a
Boss
name.
Jesus, King Jesus.
No, but seriously, we're like, at what point in the military ranking system, on the internal level, do
Yeah.
people go, okay, that guy's got real authority? Like when that person says something, it's legit happening. Is there a demarcation point on that?
It depends on the it depends on the person.
Okay.
Yeah. There's
It's
some
not a
people-
ranking thing. It's more of a person
Kinda.
thing. Okay.
So I'll put it to you this way, right? Lieutenants in general. Now the Navy is going to be different because a lieutenant in the Navy is a captain in all the other services. A captain in the Navy is a colonel in the other services.
Oh,
So let's
gosh,
just
I need
take
a-
the Navy.
I need
We'll
a
just set them
chart
aside right
already.
now. Yeah. So a lieutenant is a new officer. Okay, they're young officers. They're typically in their first 4 years.
They come out of like West Point.
Yes,
as a lieutenant.
It's your service grads.
Gotcha.
When I was at Ohio State, I was developing cadets who were going to commission and become second lieutenants, right? Once they commission and become a lieutenant, they outrank me as a master sergeant because I'm an enlisted member. So anybody who's an officer outranks every enlisted member, period. That's the chain of command. But a second lieutenant is not going to come up to a master sergeant and tell me what to do.
Because you've been around for 15 or 18 years, and they've been there
Right.
18 minutes.
Right.
Gotcha.
So there's what do we call it? Spirit and intent, or
Yeah, there's rankings on paper, and then there's like real life.
correct.
Like
so,
if bullets started flying, and like, what do we do?
Isn't that true in life, in business and in life? I mean,
it
people
should
can have a title, hold an office, but they don't necessarily have authority and influence.
Right.
There's positional leadership or positional influence, and then there's just personal.
Right.
Like some people who are in positions have very little influence, and then other people who have no title have great influence. I mean, there's always exceptions to that.
Absolutely. Every good leader, particularly in the military, always has a top sort of enlisted advisor, right? So every commander always has a chief, or I'll just use Air Force terms, a chief, which is an E9, which is the top of the enlisted corps that we can get, right? So every commander has a chief, and every chief worth their salt, who, by and large, they're all worth their salt. They're great advisors. They have no authority per se, but they have the influence over not even over the commander. They just have the commander's ear to be able to help them make the right decisions. Right?
That's great.
So a good lieutenant coming in fresh off the street who has quote unquote authority, what they're going to do if they're smart is they're going to latch on to that top enlisted person in their section that they're over, and they're going to just latch on and soak up every bit of information and mentorship that they can from that individual.
And then ultimately, right, the president is the commander in chief.
Yep, he's the one who calls the shots. I mean,
Yep.
he directs policy where to go, and then the Department of Defense, the DoD secretary, is the one who basically puts it in motion for the services to do their part, whatever that may be.
Just to finish my thought from earlier, we digressed on rankings and stuff.
Well, yeah.
But sometimes Jesus will give us specific instructions to go here or go there or change this or change that. And those are just as much orders from the one who's ultimately in charge of our lives as would be the case in the military. The way it works is a little bit different, but I think there's a lot of parallels there. Twice I decided not to take a position, the Wilbur experience, and then again coming here to Spokane. When I was in Bellingham, the Wilbur Church was offered to me, and I declined. And then Jesus got my attention and said, nope, wrong decision. I want you to go there. So I did. And the same thing when I came here to Spokane. I declined, and then the Lord said, nope, you missed it again. And so he gave me marching orders, and I obeyed, even though it was, in both cases, difficult to leave friends.
Yeah.
We had very real friends in both situations, and it was very emotional and, heart-wrenching, but we obeyed, and that's what you do.
Has that helped you in your relationship with God? The military, like we talked about last week, the Roman centurion, just like, hey, Jesus, you make a declaration, it'll happen. People will follow through.
Yep. Just
like,
say it. I'm good.
Just
I'll
say
see you
it,
later.
and I take you at your word, and I follow through on that. Like, has that helped you, having the military experience, help your faith?
Definitely.
I mean, not that it's not still faith, and we all have doubts and things, but has it been more like,
it's
hey,
helped. Yeah,
the commander said this is what's happening, we're going to follow through on it.
Yeah, it's definitely helped in a way.
Because I could see how some people might push back on, oh, geez, here's another person of authority in my life, and I'm tired of taking orders from others on earth. I don't want a God who's giving me an order. You know what I mean? You could kind of have a bad taste. I can see that as a possibility.
The military influence over my relationship with Jesus definitely made it easier for me to let go, because there were points in my life before Jesus where I was just trying to control everything, right, or avoid everything, and it's so much better with him. So if I've got somebody who is A, in authority, and B, much smarter and much better at doing whatever
and really cares about you
and loves me to the ends of
no end.
Yeah, the end of no end. Then why would I want to fight that? So as hard as Ohio was,
the end of no end.
The end of no end. I like that.
It's a new book I'm writing.
Is it? I was going to say.
I just came up with the title.
It sounds like a new Marvel movie or something.
Yeah.
The end of no end.
As hard as it was leaving here and going to Ohio, Brittany and I both pretty quickly just understood the fact that God was sending us there for a reason, and we looked at it from personal, we looked at it from professional, and from a professional standpoint, I mean, it was the high point of my career, and I got promoted to master sergeant when I was out there. Got to do a lot of great things. Got to do a lot of things that are really, I think, within my sweet spot: teaching, mentoring, leading, and then developing. Like, that was my big thing. I was able to develop young kids into young men and women, young adults and young leaders. And that I can't trade that. And then, by the way, I got to go to a lot of free Ohio State games.
Yeah. No, I've seen you on the ESPN clip.
See some cool people.
See some celebs as you're like, hey.
And I mean, the weekend before Everett was born, and on the day he was born, I was on national TV giving a shout out to my son.
Yeah. Again, who doesn't like that kind of spot? Right? That's fun. So, yeah, because I was just curious on that, and I'm glad it's helpful in your relationship with God to have it be, sometimes people push back on the authority part of the Heavenly Father.
I think that's natural for our society and culture.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I shared
our fallen nature is rebellious by definition, right? I mean, that's
the original rebellion, is to be our own God.
Yep.
And to be like God.
It's in the DNA of our flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not to be like God in his image bearers and under his authority, but to be co-gods.
To be in charge.
Yeah, to be like, we got our
master of my own universe.
Yes. Yeah, then go get your own universe. Go make your own. Yeah, that's how that works. And so as you're and we don't have to get in all the details, as you're transitioning out of Air Force into National Guard, and then with all the COVID stuff, and just your faith to to part of how you exited was just because your faith and belief in God and what you felt like He was leading you and your family into, and it was a hard transition, right? It's a hard season,
Yeah, I
in
mean,
a lot of ways.
you were there with us on the weekly, right? As
Yeah.
as we were going through all the different phases. For those that don't know, I got out of refusal for a mandate, and it was nothing political at all. It was strictly my belief in what God laid out before me, and my disagreement with this mandate that they put in place. So that was a hard navigation, and you guys were there for me for it. A lot of prayers, a lot of love, but it once we started really praying about it, and I was asking God, like, Lord, just tell me what you want me to do. I wasn't getting a whole lot at first, and then when I did finally start receiving His word, all I kept hearing was, fight it, fight it. Don't, basically, like, you're not going to comply. So once I heard that and sat on it for a little bit and continued to pray about it, and that was constantly what I kept getting back, then it was like, okay, at that point, I think I even think we had that discussion in group. At that point, it was easy in the sense of, like, we knew what the decision was. Then it was just the hard part was going to be navigating through it. But at least Brittany and I knew what our end game was, which was we're not going to do it.
I'd like to. I have such great respect, by the way, for the decision you made and the way that you approached that whole thing and the prayerfulness that surrounded it and the courage of your convictions. A lot could be said about that. But I also wonder if some of the people who are listening are looking back on their experience going through COVID, and they made different decisions for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I have similar respect for those decisions as well, and I know you do too. But I just want to make sure our listeners are clear on that this is really, in the particular circumstance you're talking about, there's not a right and wrong answer.
No.
Except that what's right is to follow Jesus. And again, that's the point of this podcast, help people find and follow Jesus. And that's what you were doing, and that's what other people do, even though in their case it may have played out differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a respectful fighting. It wasn't an AWOL type situation.
No, absolutely
right?
not,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? And so it's like, how do we navigate life when we disagree with the people who are, quote unquote, an authority above us or with us? And there's a healthy way to disagree, and there's a healthy way to be respectful but be disagreeable.
Yep.
And to go through proper process and channels. And you fought to stay serving us in our country.
I did. Yeah,
And
I put in for an exemption request, and
you, because you weren't fighting to, like, get rid of it or change the government or change the policy from on high, right? You're like, well, I'm not an idiot, so I didn't do that.
That's knowing your authority, right? Yeah. I have none.
I look down on my
Exactly.
chest. I go, I see those
Yeah.
lack of medals and
Yeah.
things. I know who's. But you fought to stay in and keep serving, and it didn't work out. And on the other side, though, now how are you with the decision and the process and feeling like following Jesus and all that?
God is so good. I mean, that's really the theme about it all, right? As hard as Brittany and I were expecting it to be, and let me highlight my all-star Hall of Fame wife, who only further empowered me in my decision and what it was that I was feeling. Because when your wife is looking at you going, hey, even if we lose it all, we're going to be okay because we're together and because we're standing for what we believe in, man, that is just made this decision all the easier in that regard. So big shout out to you, wife. You're the best. Yeah. Going through what was the question again?
No, it's fine. We all take opportunity to leverage our platform to
Yeah,
honor our wives.
yeah.
It's always a good move,
Yeah.
right, Craig?
Yep. Score big points.
Just again, post decision, and now
Thank
you're
you.
a couple
Yeah.
months into
No,
a
I'm
new
back.
job. You're a civilian guy.
Yeah.
In the whole feel of it.
Once we made the decision and we knew sort of what the steps were and had an idea of the timeline, and we dove right in with job hunting and transitioning, man, he showed up in every way possible. The transition really was about as seamless as it can be, in my opinion, because it was the timeline was compressed. Typically, you have a year between submitting for retirement and actually retiring. We did it in 4 months, And really 60 days when you break down me being gone and already transitioned out of the military and burning off all of my leave. So I think it was in December that we started looking big time for a job, and I sent hundreds and hundreds of resumes and got a couple bites, and the company that I work for now, which is local and real close to home, they popped up one day and I applied, and within the week they called me, and I had already had a couple other interviews, and those interviews went great, but they were just moving very slowly. So as soon as I let the recruiter know that these other two jobs were potential, she was awesome, and within the week I had an offer. Went through 3 rounds of interviews, and within the week had an offer, which is just God coming through in every single way possible, because every stress that Brittany and I were imagining that was going to happen didn't even come close to happening. So the transition was great.
Before we're done here, I want to go back to what you were saying about Brittany, because I think that's sometimes a point that we need to come to as we follow Jesus that is sometimes missed or overlooked or underemphasized. You were sincerely at a point where you both said, hey, we're putting it on the line. Mm-hmm. If we lose everything, we accept that.
Yeah.
That's a real possibility. And we were in Matthew 8 last week, and we'll continue next week. But I just am looking at just a few verses here. It says, now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders. I thought that was interesting. The NAS puts that word there. He gave orders to depart to the other side of the sea. Then a scribe came and said, teacher, I'll follow you wherever you go. We all say, oh, I'll follow Jesus. And Jesus said to him, well, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Are you willing? In other words, he's saying to the scribe, are you willing to be homeless to follow me? Are you willing to be inconvenienced? Are you willing to give up some creature comforts? Mm-hmm. And those are kinds of questions that I think we need to, at times, deal with in our own lives as we follow Jesus. If we say, well, Lord, I'll follow you wherever you lead me, except here, 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 and here, or if it requires this, or that.
I'm not going to go to Ohio.
Yep, I'm not going to Ohio. I'm not giving up my job. I'm not, whatever it is that gets in the way. And I think that's the point there. And anyway, I think that was a significant part, one of the most significant parts of your story there, and as you transitioned out of the military and the decision that you made and why you made it.
Yeah, that was, again, with Brittany coming beside me and even just being behind me on every bit of it. That empowerment, because there might have been situations out there where the spouse is looking at a member who didn't want to comply, and they're going, well, yeah, but then what? Are we going to lose everything? I don't want to do that, right? So I didn't have to deal with that, and I'm so grateful that Brittany was right there beside me, looking at me, going like, hey, if we lose it all, we're going to be okay, because we have Jesus.
Yeah,
and it. To new followers or to people who might be on the fence or still, taking a look, that sounds so simple, but I think that's really what it comes down to. Is as long as you're putting his priority first, it just makes the rest of it that much easier.
And you can actually, when you do put his priority in your life first, his kingdom first, then you can stand on the promise. We just went through it, Matthew 6. If you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all these other things, food, clothing, shelter, transportation, whatever it is you need, he's going to take care of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Stephen, thanks for being on the podcast today. We appreciate you sharing your story, and through that, I know people will be encouraged with their own journey of following Jesus and what it means. And now you're officially the Retired Guy podcast guest. And I thought that was the one that it was a surprisingly cool part, like where you got presented as
Master Sergeant Stephen Ramirez retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the ceremony. It was wedding-esque in the sense of like, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but it was like, for the first time ever, I now present to you. And I was like, man, this is like, we closed the chapter. It's done. Like officially, ceremonially, paperwork, You got the ID card. It says retired dude
do.
on top of
I
it.
do.
Like everything.
I have facial hair in my picture now.
like little things. Like
Yeah.
like I don't connect with that. Like, yeah. I just have bad facial hair.
Yeah, this is the obligatory newly retired or newly separated military like thing.
Yeah.
You just grow it out
Because you can do it.
because I can.
'Cause you
Nobody's
can.
telling you can't.
Don't really care how it looks right now.
It's well, Brittany will have a say on it.
Eventually.
Other than that, over to you, bud.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you for having
Great time conversation about following Jesus. And for those of you listening, we hope you have a great week and are encouraged to follow him more closely. We'll see you next time.